MG, this could be your
Well,
last potty.
man, I thought it might be last week. We're definitely right in the hit zone now. We're halfway through week 40, so any moment, man, any moment.
Hmm.
I'm kind of like willing it with my mind, and I think me wouldn't be disappointed either because poor thing, she's super uncomfortable, as I'm sure many of our listeners have gone through the journey as well. But it's not an easy thing to carry around. So beyond ready, you can see, man, got the pram in the background of everything's primed and ready to go. I've read all of my dad books. Did I say on last week's potty how I had the birthing class
Yeah.
at the hospital, which was awesome. I think I said that, but that day I was like, oh, if she came right now, this would be amazing. I've just done the class. I feel like I know the most I've ever known, and I'm already at the hospital. Come now. I was like, please come.
Oh, that's the best. We got predictions in, obviously,
Oh,
and
we did, yeah. I haven't heard from you. Yeah.
we got a couple in. One of them was like the 1st of March. So,
Wow.
but I was thinking, what happens if she comes on the leap year on the 29th?
Very possible, man. Very possible.
What do you do?
I think you'd put that down as the birthday, but then each year you would just either pick the 28th or the 1st as the birthday. But I reckon you might even just be able to put the day after on the birth certificate.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's,
I'm just thinking if it was me, like if I was a kid, it would be pretty cool to have like a birthday every 4 years. Like that'd be cool in going through primary school and stuff. It'd be such a novelty.
I don't know anyone that's born on a leap year on the 29th.
Yeah.
No one that I know. So
Well,
she'll be unique if she
stay
is.
tuned. Could
Yeah.
could happen.
How's everything over there, Scotty?
Yeah, man, it's good. Yeah, another week closer to going to a warmer climate.
It's amazing.
Yes, not long. Can't
I
wait to
know.
see you, bro.
I
It's
know.
been
Likewise, man. Yeah,
it's
well, this time in just over a week because it's a bit further for me because I fly on a Thursday morning and I don't get there till Friday afternoon because
yeah.
it's a bit more of a commute from the UK. But can't wait. It's gonna be good.
I sent Scotty a picture this week, and after I sent it, I thought I'm either going to make his day or ruin his day. So I went to the supermarket with me and ran into Scott's beautiful wife and his beautiful daughter. And Uncle Michael got a nice little hug, and then I sent Scotty a
I
picture of the two of
didn't
us.
see
And
that.
I thought, oh, that'll make his day. And then I'm like, oh, it might actually, make him want to come home even more. So
No, I did. It's very cute. Yeah,
good.
she's
Um,
gorgeous. Yeah, poor thing. She actually had her infusion yesterday because she's just got no ferritin, and so Harvey was the same, and so she had to go in and have that. Which normally I take her for stuff like that because she's a bit of a daddy's girl, but she got through it. But apparently, Jen was telling me this morning it was not ideal.
Yeah, it's tough, man. I've got the opposite. My ferritin is normally between like 700 and 1200
Wow.
because I've got hemochromatosis. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the symptoms are the same. So I totally know it's frustrating, man. And there's a lot of symptoms that go along with it. Poor angel.
Yeah, I know. It's just one of those things trying to, I mean, no one likes needles, but for a little kid to
Harder.
have a catheter in her hand and sit there for an hour and just have, that put into you. But equally, the taking the approach of just supplementing with iron, it just doesn't do anything. So I'm like, no, we just give her an infusion. It's better. It's
Yeah.
not good short term in terms of the pain, but equally, it's so much worth it. She'll be a new kid. So, but no, man, she did tell me when I spoke to her that she saw Uncle Michael.
Yeah, we did go on the little they put the dollar in the car at the shopping center, which was
Oh,
good.
man, they're dangerous. My kids they'll take you for all that you have if you put them on those things. They just don't leave.
She was just, what's funny, man? You'll love this. I don't know if Jen told you this, but before we get into questions, she just jumped in the car and for 2 or 3 minutes was just waving at just random anyone that was walking by. Your daughter would just be like, "Hey," random waves.
Yeah,
that's the
she's
best.
good.
All right, we did get a fair few questions, and I want to start with the ones that all revolve around a similar topic. And it's something that we have discussed before, but let's go over it again. And we're probably going to need your expertise, Scotty, to give us the big words. Okay, so these are all around nutrition, around training, training fasted. There's a couple of questions, so let me just read them all out and then let's try to give a collective answer for all of them, right? So
Mhm.
during a dieting phase, how critical is pre-workout nutrition? I work out at 5 a.m. as my calories are getting lower, I prefer not to have as much food that early. What would be the minimum amount of calories that are optimal to have before training? I'm currently doing 300 calories at 5 a.m. and then after training, I'm having about 400. My daily calories are 1,500 for the day. Right? So this is someone that's in prep, food's getting low, they don't want to spend so much calories before training. So they want to know, like, what is the bare minimum they can have before training, right? So that's one question. Another one is about how important is protein feeding after training? I sometimes don't eat for about 3 hours after training and I wait until I get to work. Is this going to affect my gains? So this is someone that is not having protein feeding after training and waiting a long period of time. Now, I don't know if this person is training fasted or not, so we just got to look at some context there. And then there was another one just about what's the best tips about training in the morning? How bad is it to train fasted? So there's a couple of things going on there. One is very specific about being in like comp prep, being on low food, and trying to decide where to allocate their calories because they don't have a lot of calories to allocate. Another one is about how important it is to eat straight after training. At the moment, they're waiting multiple hours before they eat. And another person's asking, is it okay to actually train fasted? So do you want to put some of that together, Scotty, and maybe come up with some parameters, some do's and don'ts, what's best practice, and that kind of stuff?
Okay, so I think if we look at the first question, person who has asked mentioned that she was having around about 300 calories before she's working out. I think the total amount of energy is probably less important compared to perhaps the substrate. So firstly, you want to make sure that you're having ideally probably 30 grams of a complete protein source, roughly 3 grams of leucine in it, just so that we get that muscle protein synthetic response. And then if you worked off a premise of, I don't know, say maybe 30 or 40 grams of carbs, let's say 30. If you're trying to protect calories, then, there is another 120. So we're working at about 240 kcal, which is under what she was originally having. So that would probably suffice, provided that she had some carbohydrate the night before. But equally, you do want to have some carbohydrate prior to exercise, given that that's going to be obviously what's going to fuel your training. But it doesn't necessarily have to be first thing in the morning. If you have obviously backloaded from the night prior, you might have topped up muscle glycogen stores to an extent. Obviously, 1,500 calories doesn't leave you a whole lot of wiggle room. But it would just come down to, if you don't have a huge appetite, then I think sometimes getting away with perhaps having a little bit less and just having something that's quick, that's going to get into the blood, relatively fast, whether it's just, a protein shake or some yogurt with some blueberries, something like that, that's quick and easy, digestible, keeping fiber and fats quite low. So I think something like that would be fine. And then obviously post that, again, you don't necessarily have to have a lot of carbohydrate after the workout. You might lean into a little bit more fiber, again, with a good source of protein, because the biggest thing when you're in a deficit that you need to be mindful of is regular protein feedings, but also ensuring that you're not putting yourself in a catabolic state, because we know that when we are in an energy compromised period, that we are susceptible to, reductions in lean mass. So you need to be doing everything you can to protect that. But equally, the best way to protect that as well is ensuring that you're creating an insult, again, disrupting homeostasis, so that you can still switch on those cellular signaling proteins that are going to induce adaptation. So you do want to have it, again, if we're working off, let's say she was having 200 grams of carbs, just for easy math, I would say I'd probably want to be giving you at least 40 to 50 of that pre-training with some good protein. I wouldn't be too stressed about having too much carbs necessarily afterwards. And again, I would probably be sticking another maybe 50, maybe even 60, probably not 60, maybe 50 grams of that in the dinner meal, so that is also like the pre-training meal, and then the rest distributing as you please throughout the day. But I think as long as you're working off a premise of ideally pre and post, you'd want somewhere in the realms of around 0.4 grams per kilo of body mass of protein, or at the very, very bare minimum, a 30-gram bolus feeding, so that you are getting that response. And that's probably going to be more important, which kind of leans into the next one. Does it matter if I don't eat for 3 hours after my workout? I think if you're having a protein feeding, and again, it ticks that box of ideally, if it's a guy, maybe 40 grams of protein, or if you work on a premise of 0.3 to 0.4 grams per kilo of body weight prior, then that will probably see you through for 2 hours-ish, 3 hours post-training. But for me, I'm kind of like, why would you want to elongate it for the sake of it? Like the risk for reward for the sake of just quickly have a shake. And if you're not energy compromised via a contest prep, just quickly have 30 grams of protein in a shake and then eat when you get to work. So it's like I'm just being cautious and preventative. So for me, I think it would be silly to just wait for the sake of waiting when you've got something that's easily accessible via a protein shake.
Yeah. So then the third question was, is it okay to actually train fasted? And if you were going to do that, what would be the best method after you finish training?
So again, context is important. If you're resistance training, if you've had a really good feeding the night prior or if you're just completely, saturated muscle glycogen, then it's not really going to make a big difference because you'll just reach into those carbohydrate stores. But again, if you're lifting weights, as I mentioned, you would want to have a protein feeding because otherwise it may have been 8-9 hours since you've last had a feed, and as a result of that, you're going to be in a state of obviously breaking down protein as opposed to synthesizing. So you want to make sure that you're putting yourself in that position. But if you were doing, say, cardio or aerobic style training, there's actually some benefit to doing that in a low carbohydrate state. We upregulate some of the key proteins that can induce mitochondrial biogenesis, and that's just a fancy word for basically it allows you to make more mitochondria or to increase the size of them. And mitochondria are basically what make ATP, and ATP is the body's energy currency. So if you were in prep and you're doing your cardio fasted, I would usually recommend they would just have some protein. So again, we get some amino acids into the blood, but I would very rarely ask my athletes to have carbohydrate. I think if we're going to do that in a deficit, we might as well do it and also yield some aerobic benefits in terms of improving cardiovascular health. So if you're doing that like a HIIT style class or like F45, it wouldn't be a big deal as long as you have protein. But if you're doing weights, then you would definitely want to have some carbohydrate.
So it ultimately sounds like having protein pre-training is probably one of the most important things.
Yeah, definitely. And we've seen that when we pair a protein feeding that ticks those boxes with resistance training, we see an elongated spike of that muscle protein synthetic response. So it can last for, several hours post that. So I think it's easier if you know that you're going to be time compromised, having a good feeding prior, within 60 minutes of training. Again, if you have the ability to have something quickly straight afterwards, do it. But if you don't, you would be better off having that approach than if you didn't have anything and then you feed protein after.
That makes complete sense. Let's like give someone clear guideline of how to pick and choose what's the most important thing to do. Protein pre-training is the most important thing to do. So they're essentially you're not really training fasted per se because you've got something in your system.
Mm-hmm.
You remember, it wasn't just a few weeks ago when Mike Uzital went on Full Ads podcast, and they were asking questions. In fairness, he had taken a couple of edibles before he started the podcast, so it was a fucking hilarious episode. But they did ask him, they're like, all right, we want to just like debunk some of the bro myths. And one of the questions they asked him is like, as a bodybuilder, what is the most important meal to the overall process in the day? And his answer was very similar. His answer was actually pre-training, but he went as far as saying, actually the meal you have before you go to bed, because you're going to wake up and train, might actually be the most important meal. The reasons that Scotty mentioned, right? Top up of glycogen. You're not going to have a feeding for 8 hours. The bros on the chat were always like, no, post-workout meal is most important. Post-workout. He's like, actually, no. Pre-workout and even going back as far as the night before can definitely provide you the most amount of benefit.
So if someone's just like, oh, I just can't stomach anything, I can't even stomach a protein shake, what can I do? Is it BCAAs, EAAs at a minimum?
Yeah, so you could sip on some EAAs. Obviously, they're a complete protein source. And I would still usually recommend, if I use myself as an example, when I would do my cardio in prep on my rest days, I would have a shake as soon as I would weigh, which would only work out to be about 20 grams of my protein. And then I would have about 15 grams of complete protein via EAAs throughout the session. So I'd be sipping on that as a result of that. But I think if you struggle to ingest, like to have a shake first thing, sometimes it's not the nicest thing in the morning. But I find for me, even in the off season, if you got to quickly get something in and you don't have an appetite, Greek yogurt with protein powder is one of the best bang for your bucks. Like you could have 150 grams of Greek yogurt with 15 grams of whey isolate, and that will give you close to 32 grams of protein. In terms of a serving size, that would probably fill up like maybe that of my mug. And that's something that I give our players before they go and do weights. They have an access, so I make yogurt pots for them. So a lot of them don't like to have shakes, and so it's literally 150 grams of Greek yogurt, 15 grams of isolate with creatine, and they either have it before they go in or they have it afterwards. And it's an easy way to get a 30-gram bolus of protein in without feeling like they've eaten anything. And these players go and then do their speed or their running sessions afterwards within an hour, and it doesn't cause any GI distress. So I think Greek yogurt with some protein powder is a really, really easy one to be able to just get it in. Don't shoot for protein bars. That's one of my other pet peeves. They're just loaded with sugar alcohols, which just sit in the large intestine and just ferment and cause GI distress and discomfort. So that's probably one of the big no-nos.
Also, just while we're talking about it, probably casein protein would probably be a no-no too.
Yeah, because we want something that's going to get into the biggest thing with pre-workout or any kind of peri-workout nutrition. We want to give consideration to, we want to get the nutrients into the blood as quickly as we can. And so the ways that we can do that is by controlling how much fat we have, because that's going to slow down gastric emptying, as is large amounts of fiber. And to an extent, if you have too much simple carbohydrate, that can also delay gastric emptying as well, because depending on the type of carbohydrate you're having. But if it changes, like say you're having it via a sports drink, if you have something that the tonicity of it is too high in terms of favoring carbohydrate instead of electrolytes, then you may not be able to get that in straight away. It may delay gastric emptying. So there's some things that you need to consider, but the main ones are just keep fiber low and keep fat low, and you'll be fine.
Awesome. Whilst we're talking about this, I think the next good question to jump onto is, what are the effects of having a long-term small calorie deficient? Why can fat loss stall if you're in a long-term calorie deficit?
So metabolic adaptation, most people will have heard of that term before. So basically, your body acclimates to the energetic environment that you expose it to via both intake and expenditure. And as human beings, that's what we're designed to do, to adapt to the environment that we're exposed to. But if you're constantly in a period of energy deprivation, again, the magnitude of the deficit will determine the adjustment that we see. You will see a difference in obviously energy expenditure and in total daily energy expenditure, because your body, if you're eating less calories and you're still performing the same as you usually would, then you will start to see that change in terms of your body's, well, it'll basically become more efficient at doing what it was doing. It'll use less energy and it'll use less calories to be able to do what it would once upon a time do. So that's where we need to be considerate and obviously be mindful of the magnitude of the deficit. And again, if you're really, really assertive early on, then you'll probably notice that you will see quite a lot of metabolic adaptation. I think that there was a paper by, the name escapes me, but I think it was called like the Calorie study. And so they looked at the different types, this is pertaining to metabolic adaptation, different types of energy restriction, whether it was a slow deficit, a deficit contributed of exercise and calories, or a really assertive deficit followed by some maintenance, and then having a look to see it like where was there the most metabolic adaptation, and there was also a control group as well, and basically what they found was that by contributing a deficit that had that perhaps wasn't as restricted from an energy intake perspective, but also had some expenditure, was the best in terms of, I guess, preserving metabolic adaptation versus just a calorie restricted diet or an aggressive calorie restricted diet followed by some maintenance, were the biggest factors that were influencing quite a lot of metabolic adaptation in terms of, I think off the top of my head, it was like, there was a difference over a 3-month period by like maybe 400 or 500 calories per day in terms of total daily energy expenditure as a result of being in the aggressive group. So I think it was 25% calorie restriction. And then there was another 25% calorie restriction, but it was split between 12.5% calories and then 12.5% energy expenditure. And then there was the aggressive weight loss followed by maintenance. And
I think it was 2 weeks, 2 on, 1 off, 2 on, 1 off. I think that was the aggressive and maintenance. Was it short term, 1 week off?
No, I think that might be a different one. With this study, it was 15% of body weight once that was achieved, and then going straight into the maintenance phase. And so the calorie restricted plus exercise I remember one of the key pieces from that paper was that they actually saw a positive effect in terms of the 3 to 6 month period. Energy expenditure, total daily energy expenditure was actually greater as opposed to the other controlled groups, where there was a big decline. But the biggest one was just purely being in a low calorie diet, and then obviously having the 15% of body weight, get there as quick as I can, and then go to maintenance. That saw the biggest drop. I think it was about maybe 550 calories a day from baseline to the 3 month mark. And even the calorie restriction diet was close to 400 calories a day, compared to the same deficit, but contributed via some energy restriction and also via energy expenditure. So I think when we look at that, like that data, it probably tells us that you need to be mindful of the magnitude of the deficit. Anyone can just put someone in a deficit for a certain period of time, but how long you put them for, and obviously the degree of that deficit is ultimately going to determine, how much metabolic adaptation that we do see. So, and everyone's uniquely going to be different, but it's natural. If you think about, you're exposing yourself to a rigorous day of training, activity, whatever, and you're eating less, at some point your body has to try and bridge that gap. And so it will become more efficient on what you're doing, and it will utilize less energy until it gets to the point where adaptation is set in and you're back at baseline and you're no longer in a deficit by performing those tasks.
So you're ultimately saying that that metabolic adaptation, the biggest component of that is actually your daily energy expenditure going down because you're just doing less and you're getting a little bit lazier. So
Yeah.
therefore
Mm-hmm.
you're adapting to the deficit.
Man, I reckon like, as I was getting leaner and leaner through prep, the bang for my buck for say 3,000 steps became half of what I would be expecting. My resting heart rate went from like 65 to 48 or something. So like, that in itself shows that, I'm just working nowhere near as hard to get that same outcome.
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. So it's that total daily energy expenditure, and we see that as a result of just basically sleeping metabolic rate or sedentary based movement. We see such an adjustment to that, in terms of that is what is obviously causing this massive bridge from where you were to obviously to how quickly your body acclimates to it. But again, I mean, this study I think had 48 participants, so there was basically the 4 groups of 12s. And so if you look at that data, and granted they were in overweight people, and this is why it's obviously, it's specific to the individual, but the data was pretty clear in that the control group didn't really see any change in terms of metabolic adaptation, and the calorie restricted plus exercise, still contributing to a 25% deficit, saw much more positive results, as opposed to the group that went really hard, really quick to lose that 15%. They suffered the worst. And then just the 25% deficit via calorie restriction was a close second. So I think when you look at that, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to identify that if you place yourself in a significant deficit, that your body is over time going to offset that. And again, this 3 month mark proved to be the most drastic in terms of where we saw a lot of that change. And in the second block of the last 3 months, there was less of an adjustment. And that's because that adaptive phase has already set in. So, I mean, when I interpret, I guess, that data in terms of how I would absorb it and dilute it and potentially put it in applied practice, would be that, okay, so you need to be mindful. Yes, we want to put you in a deficit, but does that mean that we just want to make you eat less and then not place an emphasis on training? Whereas if we can focus on, say, maybe we're taking from the energy intake perspective, but we're also leaning into, let's really place an emphasis on training intensity. Let's make sure that, we're using an Apple Watch to train. If our training sessions are less than 500 calories, we know that we're just not training hard enough. And that's why you'll see a lot of athletes, and I see it now, like I could go and do a leg session and I'll burn 14 to 1600 calories, but at the back end of prep, I'd be lucky to burn 700 or 800. And even though you're training hard and you're giving everything, that's just your body is utilizing less energy at that point. So they're things that we just need to be mindful of. But equally, metabolic adaptation is going to happen whether we like it or not. But there are tools we have access to mitigate the extent and the rate at which that occurs.
So the takeaways there from that study specifically is the reasons why we do preps the way we do preps. It's like a slow, steady, long approach. We use cutting calories from food, but also putting in extra energy expenditure via steps or cardio, because we want to do a bit of both, but we want to do it slow over time so that we don't adapt so quickly Because if we do it in a really aggressive approach, we're going to adapt and then we're going to be left with nothing, right? So that's what the kind of takeaway from that study is. And that's probably the reasons why we do what we do from a comp prep perspective. With this person asking, they're doing a small deficit over a long period of time. Why does their fat loss stall? The reason why it stalls is because they're just adapting. So eventually you will just adapt and you will need to make an adjustment so that you are continuously in a deficit. I'd also say too is if you're trying to do a small deficit, it's really hard to control because there's so many tracking errors or inaccuracies that can happen within your food, which can cause you sometimes to be, say you're trying to do like a 50 calorie deficit, like really, really small. If you're not accurate with your food you're tracking, that gap can close and it can be zero or no deficit whatsoever. And if you're, for whatever reason, not consistent with your steps or your energy output for the day, or it's a rest day, you can again close that gap with the 50 calorie deficit you're trying to be in. And it can result in being not in a deficit at all. So sometimes trying to have like a small micro deficit is probably not the best approach either, because it's hard to actually stay within that because there's so many errors in our tracking, but also too is our expenditure every day is always slightly different because we're always doing something a little bit different. We're not super robotic. So our takeaway is obviously a longer deficit is better combined with a calorie deficit and also energy expenditure. But a really, really tiny deficit is not good either, because there's going to be days where we're actually not going to be in a deficit due to what we just mentioned.
And also, if you're talking about 50 or 100 calories, if we think about this, quantitatively, if you work off a premise that, 1 kilogram of mixed human tissue is around about 7,000 calories, and you're putting yourself in a 350 weekly kcal deficit, you're not going to really see much of a change. As a rule, you're going to want to induce, like at least you'd probably want to be making an adjustment of anywhere from, maybe 250 to 500 calories potentially a day if you're wanting to see that kind of change. Because if you don't, like how do you expect to lose a certain amount of weight? And again, that deficit, as we just covered before, doesn't necessarily have to be as a result of energy intake. It can be via also increasing expenditure to create the magnitude of that deficit.
On that, so if someone does stall in their fat loss, what would be the magnitude of the adjustment that you would take to continue that deficit? Would you try to do, 100 calorie adjustment or more than that?
You would need to, so if they've had like say 7-10 days and their weight's not moving, then they're not in a deficit anymore. They're at maintenance. So you just basically back at baseline. And what we've seen is metabolic adaptation. And when people are like, oh, could there really be that much of a change within, 3 months? Well, literally that study that I just cited before, I think it was Redmond and colleagues from memory, and it was in like 2009 or something. But that is a perfect example of you can see 400 to 500 calories over a 12-week period in terms of that kind of adaptation. And but there's obviously other things like depending where your body composition is at, where that set point is, when you start to see changes in, endocrinology and some of the other bits and pieces that are maybe starting to cause that negative shift and basically telling you that we don't want you to lose any more body fat. So we're going to start to conserve energy. So when that does happen, you obviously got the option to, and depending how far you're down, this is where you need to know what tools to use and when to use them. But, maybe you take from some energy intake and then maybe you also add to some expenditure and you put in place some cardio. I think steps are a really inefficient way to create a deficit. I think too many coaches are like, yeah, just do an extra 2,000 steps. Whereas if you look at how many calories they're going to burn in relation to that, they might get like maybe 50 or 60 calories. But that may also then result in them being super tired. And so as a result of that, resting metabolic rate and total daily energy expenditure actually comes down even further, which is why I'm like, sometimes when you give back and you piss off some of those stupid steps that people are doing, 16, 18, 20,000, when instead just stick them on a cardio piece of equipment and get them to hit a certain amount of expenditure at a certain intensity for a certain amount of time, more time efficient, get them to do it first thing in the morning so they can get some of those other training adaptations we spoke about, rather than just getting them to just walk for the sake of walking, when in reality, walking is one of the easily most compensatable, movements that we're going to do as a human being.
Yeah.
We take small strides, we walk slower, we slouch when we walk.
Yeah, totally get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. We're going to talk about untracked meals in the off season. So, what are your thoughts of untracked meals in the off season? My old coach strongly encouraged them, whereas my new coach is opposed to them. I'm quite happy to not have them as I'm a creature of habit, but I'm curious of what your takeaway is. That's one part of the question. Another question I got was, I see fitness influencers that post cool meals that they are buying on a daily basis, poke bowls, sandwiches, smoothies, etc. How are they tracking these? Surely they aren't. So MG, maybe you want to start on, do you allow untracked meals in the off season? And also, do you see people just, let's call it taking the piss, where they're just having untracked meals all the time? They're fitness influencers, they're posting all their sexy food they're having on a daily basis, and you just know they're not tracking them.
Yeah. Well, personally for myself, I do like athletes in off season to have a little bit of freedom and flexibility. But the most important thing to remember is that I'm still asking them to exercise common sense, and I'm still asking them to have some type of guesstimation, right? So like if I've got you on 3,000 calories a day and you know that you're going out for dinner, I don't want you to eat all of your 3,000 before you go out for dinner. So I will say to you, leave roughly, and sometimes I'll even give you some specific numbers. It's like, oh, what are you going out to eat? Oh, we're going to this place. Cool. Eat this amount. So eat 75% of your protein, eat 70% of your carbs, and leave 50% of your fat. I'll even give you some guidelines as to how much to leave for the meal because, knowing what Scotty said before, if it takes, a 7,000 calorie surplus to put on a kilo of fat, you can really build that up really, really quickly. And if you're going to overeat, you're already in off season, so you're already in a surplus. And now you're going to add 12 to 1,500 calories every Saturday night. That can build up really, really quickly. So I've got no issue with them. I have athletes that enjoy them and athletes that don't because they don't feel the need to. But the ones that are, I always ask that they do their best guesstimation. And if I need to chip in and give them some target macros to leave or calories for that meal, I'll do it. I often look at menus for athletes as well and say, here's what I would pick. Here's what I reckon it will work out to in calories, which means you should eat this much for the rest of the day. I think totally fine to have. Just don't be stupid with it and don't take advantage of it. I think the worst thing that I see sometimes is like people building up for their, I still see online people calling it their cheat meal. It's just an opportunity to catch up with family and friends and have something that sometimes isn't even high calorie. We go out in off season sometimes and just get like a chicken, potato and salad. We don't know exactly what's in it, but we know that we leave, between 800 and 1,200 calories for that meal. And sometimes, guess what? We undereat and we wake up and we're a little bit lighter. That happens too. I think for the other question, the thing you got to remember is that not every fitness influencer tracks macros. So that's the first thing, right? Not every fitness influencer tracks macros. And, if they're posting fancy meals, they've got no idea how much the calories are unless their friend owns the restaurant, which I highly doubt. They're either not tracking macros, they don't care. And if they're telling you that they're tracking macros, they're not. They're doing what I just said before. They're giving you their best guesstimation based on what they think is in the meal from the menu. But don't assume that every person you see on Instagram tracks macros. Just because we talk about it, we do it, we love it for our goal. Not everybody feels the same as us, and not everyone has the same relationship to food and food calculation.
Yeah, definitely in the off season, I allow people to have that flexibility. Normally, I'd say, you can have 2 untracked meals per week or 3 untracked meals per week, and pretty much utilize what you said. They just bank calories for it for the day, and they allocate, 800, 1,000, whatever that may be, and they make sure they track everything up until that point in their MyFitnessPal, whatever that may be, and then they just have a gap. And that gap allows them to go and have their untracked flexible meal. Because I also think there's a part of, in the off season, you need to be social, you need to be flexible. I think you need to make sure that you feel like you had that opportunity to do that and feel refreshed and kind of, let's call it, get it out of your system in a way, because when prep starts, everything's locked down and ready to go. And the last thing you want is for someone to be super meticulous through their whole off season. And then when they get to prep, they're completely burnt out and they don't want to track, and it's going to hinder them. So sometimes people need a little bit of a break and some flexibility in the social aspect behind the off season for sure. I think the ones that the fitness influencers, and maybe for whatever reason, they think that they need to post fancy food all the time because it keeps, the followers happy, whatever that may be. Yeah, they're most likely not tracking that food if they're buying it store-bought. I don't see a problem with that if that's part of their plan and that's their untracked meals for the week and it's been allocated to them and they're actually literally following the plan and still doing that. That's perfectly fine. I think you got to be careful those people don't fall into a trap of doing that every day and then going, well, I had an untracked meal today. Stuff it. I won't track for the rest of the day. And then they do it again tomorrow. Oh, geez, I had a bagel for breakfast with my friend at the cafe. Uh, I won't track for the rest of the day. And then they just build this really, really bad habit of just completely not tracking and not knowing where they need to be. And that's just a recipe for disaster. So I think those people need to be careful. I think they need to, stick within their whatever their untracked meals their coach is allocating to them and making sure they're not creating bad habits that is going to affect their adherence for the week. And then all of a sudden, as you said, MG, they're not taking the off season seriously. They might be even under eating or potentially overeating too much, and they've just wasted that off season because they decided they wanted to make their social media posts nice and fancy. And I said this on, I don't know if it was our podcast or maybe a podcast I was on. I said I can almost guarantee that most people would change the way they're eating if they couldn't post what they were eating. I'd almost guarantee that people would probably eat more plain and more simple if they couldn't show all the amazing, sexy food that they're eating in the day.
Yeah, and just remember, like, comparison is the thief of all joy. Like, you have no context what that influencer is doing with the rest of their day. They might have a terrible relationship with food, which you don't want to mirror. You might be looking at them going, how are they eating all this amazing food and still staying lean? That might be their only meal for the day, because the most important thing to them is how they look on social media and the way their physique looks. So I definitely wouldn't be like looking at what somebody's doing online from a sexy food point of view and be concerning myself with their situation. Yeah. And trying to mimic or mirror what they're doing or eating and wondering how they're fitting the calories in. Who gives a fuck?
Yeah. What do you think, Scotty? Untracked meals in the off season and people not tracking their food and keep posting all the fun food they're having?
Yeah, I agree with everything that you guys said. Everyone knows that I'm Mr. Consistency. I don't really do the whole untracked things, but if you want to do that, that's fine. But I don't think there's anything wrong with either or. But obviously, I guess it comes down to how important are your goals. Does it influence composition outcome? Yes. Is there discrepancy in tracking? Yes. I mean, you could have anywhere from 20% to 400%. There's been again, I don't know the name of the study, but I remember reading about it. There was like a 400% discrepancy. They took all these meals, I think it was over in America or Canada, and they stuck them in a bomb calorimeter and measured how much obviously energy was in the profile of them. And with some of these meals, there was a 400% discrepancy on what was stated versus what's in it.
Wow.
Which is off the charts. So you go and get a Nando's and then you're tracking that because they've given you the calories there. Yeah, sweet, I'll track that. Do you think that the kid that's 17 years old that mum won't give him any pocket money and he's having to baste chicken breast, do you think he really cares if he put the wrong sauce on, or did he cut the chicken fillets to be the same size? Did he weigh out how much tzatziki sauce? Of course he didn't. So you're always driving blind to an extent with things like that. And I'm not saying that you can't have those meals, but equally, you're kidding yourself if you think, oh, I tracked it, so it's accounted for. It's not. And that's why when people who eat that stuff in prep, it's like, again, success leaves clues. You see the top people, the top physiques, do you see them eating that sort of stuff? Do you see them hyper food focused and posting what they're eating every day? Not really. So I think you're either one of those Instagram people that post their food all the time and like you genuinely maybe do get satisfaction from the likes and people commenting on that, which is fine if that's your thing. But equally, I think if you're using flexible dieting to try and be your thing that you do whilst also trying to be an optimal bodybuilder, you can't have your cake and eat it. So you have to be willing that if you're doing this, you're deviating from the system, which is fine. But if you do it for long enough, as you know, MG said, it's a very slippery slope.
Awesome. Let's move on to some training questions, and they're the what are your top and what are your favorites? So let's just go through them. So favorite ab exercise, pick one only. MG, give me one. Favorite ab exercise?
Leg raises.
Hanging or on a bench or laying down?
Yeah, I like hanging, but some people just prefer or think they get a little bit more, better connection with it, or get a little bit less hip flexor if they're doing it lying on a bench. Personally, I like hanging, but
what about the ones on the upright kind of machine?
Roman chair, yeah.
Which one do you like better? Full hanging from a bar?
I love full hanging, man.
Yeah. Do you use wrist straps and like strap in on them? No, you raw dog it, huh? You just grip on the bar and just hang on for dear life.
Yeah, I do. There's probably better exercises for your core. You just asked me the one I like the most. I like that one.
Okay. Scotty, which one do you like the most?
Full transparency, I don't really do a lot of abs. Other than my prone holds before I squat and deadlift. But I like lying, when I do them every now and then, lying leg raises off a bench, just because I find that really, really challenging, like mentally just pushing to a point of how much more pain you can tolerate with that specific movement. That's just from a proprioception perspective. I'm not saying that that's the most optimal exercise, but I guess you could say that.
I like hanging leg raises too, but I wrist strap onto the bar so I can literally let go of my grip. It doesn't really matter.
Hmm.
But I find that using the ab wheel, the ab roller thing, right? That gives me the most DOMs. Like if I really push as hard as I possibly can and get like a lot of reps out, maybe 15 or 20, that'll give me the most DOMs ever.
I used that tonight, man. I got it out for the class I was running, and I was like, I'm just going to do 10 reps. It got me too, man.
Have you ever done it from a standing position, like full,
I've never tried. No.
Yeah.
I'll give it a go.
I'm too scared. I'm going to face plant and
I
break
don't
my
know if I'm
nose.
that flexible, to be honest, but I'll give it a
Listen,
go.
you're really tall, so
I feel
it's
like
a
Scotty
long way
could
to
do
go
it.
up and down.
I feel
Yeah.
like Scotty could do it.
All right, next one. Top three favorite exercises to build shoulders for females. But it can be for males because we all have the same anatomy. So, MG.
Lateral raise, single arm shoulder press machine,
Ooh.
pin or plate loaded, and upright row.
So let's go. So upright row, barbell, dumbbell, or like a cable attachment,
Oh, like a cable attachment.
like a straight bar or
Easy bar.
like an easy bar. Okay, yeah. Did you say you said side raises or lateral raises? Do you do dumbbell, machine, standing,
Dumbbell.
seated,
Dumbbells.
dumbbell? Yeah.
Chest supported. Thanks. Well, not chest supported, hip supported. That's the Scotty special though. But a single arm shoulder press machine, man, would be my number one. I love it.
Like a hammer strength where you sit back slightly.
Pin or plate loaded. Slight lean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scotty?
Plate load, shoulder press, like a hammer strength. I would say a cable lateral raise, but in a slight incline position, just challenging it more so in the lengthened position. And they're probably my biggest two. And I like a dumbbell shoulder press. At the moment, that's literally my sequence. I literally go with a plate load press into a lying lateral raise into a dumbbell shoulder press with a slight incline. I haven't had a dumbbell press on the menu for ages and ages, and I've just put it in, and I feel I'm getting a nice little rise of linear progression. So I like it at the moment, but maybe in a few more months when I can't get the heavy weights up, I won't.
I was literally just thinking that it's going to get to a point where you just can't lift those dumbbells up, and then you realize, like, I don't
Well,
know.
even now that Jen's gone, trying to, get anything above like 42, just to, like, once you get them up, it's all right, but to actually get them from a dead stop to move. And my gym doesn't have those fancy things those wheels where you just put the dumbbell in and then you just sort of sit back into it and then they just fall back.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have that
I've never seen one of those, man. I've seen it online, but I've never seen one in a gym anyway.
Yeah.
Mm.
For
What
me,
about you?
a lateral raise. Now, there's two types that I like. One is I like using a seated machine because you can do slow negatives, like really
Hmm.
good tempo on a machine. It's just hard to do it on a dumbbell, right? And if I am going to use a dumbbell or something attached to the hand, I actually like using kettlebells, just the hanging of the weight in the hand, or
Hmm.
like, some weight plates, how they've got the grips and you can grab onto a weight plate because it's got the holes in it. That it's just, there's something about a dangling weight as you are raising it up. It just feels better on my shoulder. I get a really, really good pump compared to like a dumbbell just in the hand. If you've never done it before, give a kettlebell a go or a weight plate that kind of dangles when you do a lateral raise. And then shoulder press. But I'm with you, Scotty. I like dumbbell, but I actually like single arm,
Yeah.
either in like a half kneeling stance or even
Yep.
seated and just single arm dumbbell. Because I find that when you're single arm, you can really drop them down really, really low and just focus on the tempo and the movement in a single arm.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
that Smith machine variation on a kneeling one arm row is also really, really nice too. If you ever get a chance to run that,
a
very
Smith
smooth.
machine,
So what you do, so like with the kneeling one arm press, so if you're in this position, the other hand's reaching out, so
yes,
you literally line yourself up, and with obviously the poles and the barbell running across perpendicular, it allows you to get a really good stretch, control the negative, and you can get some of those partial reps out. Versus with a dumbbell, you sort of have a bit more of a sticking point.
hmm
So and someone that might have some niggly shoulders, it's a nice variation too.
I've done that because you put that in my program and I did it like half kneeling on the
Yes.
Smith. And yeah, it was really, really good. Definitely really good. And you can
Yeah, good
also
pumps.
have the stoppers set up on the Smith, so you
Hmm.
have safety there. And yeah, you can do partials and just lock it out on the next click if you can't get it all the way up. So that
Yeah.
is definitely a good one. And then third one would be I like a single arm rear delt. See, I'm more single arm with my stuff because my shoulders are stuffed. Like I get better activation doing unilateral on the shoulders for me. So
Hmm.
a rear delt fly using like a cable, just like gripping when you just grip the end of the
Yeah, the
attachment
ball, hold over the ball. Yeah.
ball and
Hmm.
just with a straight arm, just straight back. Yeah,
Hmm.
love them. All right, a quick draw, no explanation. So we're just going to fire off some questions. You just got to give me what your answer is. So we'll go MG, we'll go Scotty, we'll go me. All right. So good genetics or training hard as fuck? MG.
Training hard as fuck.
Scotty.
Good genetics, because I already train hard as fuck, so that will take me to a new level.
I love that, bro. I'm going to say training hard as fuck, but I love your answer. I love your answer. Quads or hamstrings? MG.
Quads.
Scotty.
Hamstrings.
Yeah, I'm hammies too. What's your favorite? Would you like if you had to do the rest of your life like a stiff leg dead or some kind of leg curl? Pick any leg curl you want. Which one would
Yeah,
you go?
stiff leg dead without a doubt. For me, there's just something that I love about picking something even more so than a normal deadlift because you have to say so much tighter. It's so much more honest. You know straight away if it was garbage or not. And equally, you can't really cheat on a stiff leg because the range is so much further. And so, you know that it's a lot more honest. Yeah, there's just something in that.
Yeah. All right, next one. MG, sleep or sex?
X.
Sex.
Sick.
Yeah, same. You can live without sleep, but you can,
I already do.
strong or lean?
Lean.
Strong.
Strong. Pasta or pizza?
Pizza.
Pizza.
Pizza. What's your favorite pizza? Actually, have you ever had potato on a pizza?
Thin sliced potato. Yeah.
Yes. MG, number
Yeah.
one ingredient.
Mushroom.
Mushroom. I wouldn't have picked that. Macros or micros?
Macros.
Yeah, macros.
Yeah, macros all day. Alrighty, let's leave it there, boys. That was a good one. I like ending on that. Please
Mm.
send us more.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Either end on it or start on it.
Yeah, one or the other.
Yeah, I like it.
All
Yeah,
right,
it's good.
hey, this might be the last one.
Wish us luck, man. It's time,
This
isn't it?
this might be it. I really hope that my prediction comes true. So hang on, Scotty, you were the 21st, right?
Yeah.
So that's
That's
tomorrow.
tomorrow.
For us, that's
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Fuck, bro, you got to get into bed. You got a big day tomorrow.
MG's the 22nd, so that's Thursday. We're recording this on a Tuesday night, our Melbourne time.
Hmm.
Scotty's Tuesday morning.
So what is
Hmm.
it? What is it for you, Scott? It's 11 a.m. because 10 p.m. here. Yeah.
Yeah, man, it's 11 a.m.
Yeah, it's 10 p.m. here. I was Saturday the 24th, so I'm hanging in there. MG, I'm going to see you on Friday, hopefully at your gym in the morning.
Yeah, and I think Scotty,
If you're not there,
I think Jen's coming down to visit and drop some stuff off. So
Oh, nice.
it will be TMG on Friday, just not SM. It'll be JM.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
yeah. JM will be there representing. Yeah, I think she's dropping off some essentials for me, MT, of which rice flour,
Yeah, of
some
course.
peanut butter,
Yeah,
protein powder.
I met your father-in-law too, Scotty, as well.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, yeah, he was nice, man. He's
He's one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet.
yeah.
He's a legend.
Evie was giving him a bit of cheek, and he said,
Honestly, Evie slaps the fuck out of him.
yeah, it's
She
the man.
just,
She was being
yeah.
fox gas to him.
There's literally there's one man in my daughter's life, and it's me, which I love,
Yeah,
but equally, yeah, she's got so much sass and attitude.
he said,
It's funny, and he's so good with her because he stirs her up and she just slaps him and he just takes it.
yeah, it's a bit. I got to see it in the flesh.
Yeah, it's very funny.
all right, boys. Scotty, it might just be you and me for a little bit after this.
Yeah, man. Well,
Well, you
next
never know.
week,
I might even, sneak on for a surprise visit. Who knows?
We'd love that. We'd love
Yeah.
it.
yeah, we would, and then we're doing a live one, aren't we, over in Bali?
Yeah, so we're going to do a potty while we're in Bali with all the participants, with a live audience. It will be recorded though, and then most likely drop the following week because we'll have to edit it and stuff. So
Mhm.
we're going to have to fill in a gap. while we're there, which I think I'm going to have something up my sleeve so I can fill in a gap and actually release a podcast while we're away for the retreat. But it won't be the retreat podcast; it'll be something else. So stay
Yeah,
tuned.
there's some pretty big stuff coming up. I've heard a rumor of something
Yeah,
big.
yeah, there's some big stuff coming up. So I'm sure we're going to find some things to fill in while we wait for that to come through.
Mm.
So we're good to go. All right, boys. Scotty, enjoy your day. MG, enjoy your
Thanks,
night,
man.
and
Thanks, man.
we'll chat soon.
MG,
Stay tuned.
chat
Stay
soon,
tuned.
boys. Have a good
Thanks,
one.
man.